I'm Patricia Walsh. I'm the Public Art and Civic Design Senior Program Manager with Americans for the Arts. Part of my role at Americans for the Arts is to support all of you and your colleagues around the country who are working to make public art happen in your communities. My pronouns are she and her, and you will notice the option to wear pronoun tags when you checked in. This is part of Americans for the Arts' ongoing work to ensure everyone who engages with our programming feels accepted and included. I encourage you to pick one up outside of registration today. All right. As we continue through the next few days, I want to invite everyone to download the app, which holds information, ongoing updates such as room changes, and ways to connect with colleagues while here. You can find the app by searching Americans for the Arts on your device's app store, or go to americansforthearts.org/event app to download. And as you're here for the next day and a half, I just want to thank all of our fabulous exhibitors who will be out in our center stage area, so near the registration section. And thank you, all of you, for being here. And we really look forward to engaging with you on fantastic conversations and learning more about the work you're doing. So I encourage all of you to connect with them throughout the next day and a half. So thank you. And then for tonight's programming, the Public Art 5 and 5, which will start at 7:30 p.m. right here in this event, right here in this room, excuse me. We had a fantastic last-minute sponsorship, which we're really, really appreciative of, from the Airport Foundation and Arts at MSP. Ben Owen, yes, thank you. Ben Owen, director of the Airport Foundation MSP of the Minneapolis St. Paul International Airport, sponsored our event this evening, which includes the serving of appetizers and a cash bar. Like I said, the 5 and 5 presentation will take place right here at 7:30 p.m. So please come back and join us for that. And so, moving on with the program, I just want to take this moment to invite one of our fabulous partners, Mary Altman, Public Arts Administrator for the City of Minneapolis Arts, Culture, and Creative Economy. Everyone welcome Mary.
Where's the clicker? This is the clicker? Cool. I'm learning the technology right now. Hi, I'm Mary Altman. I'm the Public Art Administrator for the City of Minneapolis. I'm also a lifelong resident of St. Paul, so besides welcoming you to Minneapolis, I feel I'm qualified also to welcome you to St. Paul. So welcome to the Twin Cities. This phrase, Danya Yahi, is a Dakota phrase. I want to thank Patricia for recognizing the tribes who were here long ago and are here in full force now. Tanya Yahi means, it is good you are here. So it's a Dakota welcoming phrase, and it is good that you are all here. One of the things that's really exciting me about this next couple of days is the amount of Native American art that you're going to have the opportunity to see. 2% of the population of Minneapolis is Native American. In the 1850s, 18% of the population was Native American. The European settlers who came to Minnesota exiled many of the Native people to reservations in Minnesota and South Dakota and places like Canada. But we are lucky to have a vital Native American population in Minnesota and a growing population. And there are many opportunities to see indigenous art while you're here. If you're going, first of all, there's the American Indian Cultural Corridor, which is like 1.5 miles from here. Great opportunity to see public art by Native American artists. Also, if you're going to be here for Northern Spark, part of Northern Spark takes place on the American Indian Cultural Corridor, and so you'll have a chance to enjoy works by lots of Native artists. Radical Playground is happening at the Commons, and if you're going to be here as part of Northern Spark or as part of the convention, you might be there tomorrow night. And also, the Minneapolis Institute of Art has a fabulous exhibit of work by Native American women that I really encourage you to check out. Minnie, as in Minneapolis, means water, and if you flew here, you saw probably all of the fabulous bodies of water that we are known for in our city. Of course, we are centered on the Mississippi River, and I really encourage you, if you, one of the best places to view the river and the city is to stand on the Stone Arch Bridge. And so I really encourage you to find time to do that in the next day or so. We are also a city of lakes, and we used to be a city of actually more lakes. We filled some in. And our largest lake is Bede-Makaska. Bede-Makaska is the name of the lake, and it was recently reclaimed by the Dakota people, by the park board, by the city, and by the federal government. We dedicated a work on Bede-Makaska last weekend, and a gathering space for Dakota people and Native people and white people to celebrate the former presence of the Dakota people on this lake in a village called Hayata Atunwe. And there's art there by Sandy Spieler, Mona Smith, and Angela Two Stars. The image Tanya Yahi that you saw on the first slide is actually part of pavement art designed by Angela Two Stars. And there's also a fabulous website designed by media artist Mona Smith that celebrates the ancestors of the village Hayata Atunwe in the words of their descendants. And the artists also give tours of the works on Bede-Makaska. It's bedemakaska.net. So you can learn about the art and the people who lived in Hayata Atunwe from your phone without even going there. I encourage you to go there, but check out the website. I said Minnie means water, Minnesota means sky-tinted water, and there are many people from Minnesota here today. I am just one piece of the public art ecosystem in Minnesota, and so I don't feel that it's really appropriate for me alone to thank you, so I'm going to ask my colleagues to indulge me. So my Minnesota colleagues who are arts administrators, public arts administrators, working for both government, and private, nonprofits, freelance arts administrators, if you could stand up and join me in the welcome. Come on. Stay standing, please. Please, stay standing, stay standing. Also, if you are a Minnesota artist, if you could stand up and join us in the welcome. Come on, I saw some. We would not be here if it wasn't for you. If you are a Minnesota funder, a fabricator, a community organizer, or another ally of public art, if you could please stand. So on behalf of all of us, I want to welcome you to Minnesota. We hope that you enjoy your time here, that you find it stimulating and creative and also comfortable. We offer you our hospitality, and we are looking forward to getting to know you. Tanya Yahi. And now I have the privilege of introducing Lester Burg, Deputy Director of MTA Arts and Design in New York City and the Public Art Network Council Chair.
Good morning. The clicker isn't clicking, so I am now from Minnesota. Okay, that's me in front of a hot dog cart in my office to prove that I'm from New York. Can you hear me? So welcome to Minneapolis. It's a place that people don't go to unless they have a reason to come, which is to see public art administrators, Fresh Lakes, Mary Tyler Moore's house, which I saw this morning, the Ned Kahn piece a block away. It's a great place to visit, and if you're from here, you're very lucky. So as chair of the Public Art, what are we called? The PAN Council, Public Art Network, we've had a very busy year. Working in committees, we have looked at best practices, expanding on the great work that Sarah Conley, the former chair, Sarah Conley Odenkirk, worked on to develop new guidelines, best practices to reflect the shifts in the field which are rapidly changing the way we introduce ourselves. People call me sir, but that's a joke. It's him, he, her, whatever. Anyway, we're adapting, some faster than others. The Communications Subcommittee has been working on how we message public art, how we communicate the story. We all know what we do. We affect people's lives in the places they go. For many people, it's the only art they have an experience with, they encounter on their daily path. How do we communicate that? One way you can help is using those boards in the back of the room that say, what role does public art play in your life? Why is public art important to community? We're gathering all this information for the work that we do. And the other committee, Cultural Equity, is doing great work in expanding upon Americans for the Arts policy statement about cultural equity to bring it into an implementation. How do we get not only artists of color, but administrators, and even how do we look at sites that really impact the whole community, not just the people making the decisions and our city council members who are not arts professionals. Those are the issues we deal with. We'll be talking about in more detail as we get through today's fun 10 hours. We'll resume at the end at 5 by 5, which is a way to unwind and learn in a more informal setting about some of the great work that's being done, and that's another council initiative. I wanted to thank Americans for the Arts for all their support and work. We've given a lot of input into how this pre-conference goes, and we're anxious to start it. So I am just going to shift gears and introduce the man of the hour and of the conference, President and CEO of Americans for the Arts, Bob Lynch. Thank you all. And while Bob comes, I wanted to welcome the three newest members of the council, Chris Gatta, please wave, Sue Lamb, and of course Ben Stone, who runs the public art program at the airport, which we've all experienced. Thanks very much, and welcome, Bob.
So good morning, everybody. And I am really honored to be here to help kick things off and to welcome you. My own pronouns are he, him, and I go by either, I was asked this by either Bob or Robert, which has been a lifelong schizophrenic experience. But I want to say congratulations to everybody. This is a very large gathering for a pre-conference, and I think, Patricia, I don't know, the largest gathering, almost the largest gathering that we've had for the Public Art Preconference. So. The leadership that I see all around the country and the work that you do is extraordinary, and I get to see a lot of it because I'm on the road all the time, and it's wonderful and comforting to know that you're out there. A couple of things. I want to thank the Public Art Council. Lester, thanks for the leadership there and for the introduction. Public Art Council working on behalf of issues that then we at Americans for the Arts try to take on. I want to thank the staff of Americans for the Arts, particularly Patricia, for the work that she does. And others like Ruby and Clay and Barbara and Pam also work and contribute on this. Pam Corza and I have worked together for a long time, over 40 years, and she taught me everything I first learned about public art. So a great team of people that I get to work with. I also want to mention John Hayworth on our board of directors, who is our liaison to you in the public art issue. So thank you, John. So congratulations to all of you for the stunning array of projects all across our country. We can see it in Year in Review. You know each other's work. You see it there. And also the array of issues that you are dealing with through public art. I think that you're tackling some important issues of the day, hard issues of the day, needed issues for the transformation of our country through public art, and I think that's critically important. 50 years ago this summer, I headed off to Woodstock. Was anyone else there? No, see that? Okay, we're a dwindling group of Woodstockians. You know, it's interesting. I've thought about it in many ways over the years, but every person there, every car there, including my Volkswagen bus, every vendor, every act that was there was, it seemed like a public art statement. Art was part of everybody's, you know, being at the time, and the whole thing looked like that as well. And it was my first really inclination of the power of art that we hold here in this room and you hold in your communities. And I think about it all the time that my journey, and my journey here today, is actually a public art journey. I passed right outside of our office for 50 years has been a Louise Nevelson, and my favorite artist, giant Louise Nevelson sculpture, and that inspires me every day. And interestingly, it's placed on the spot where Walt Whitman lived when he lived in Washington. And then I get to National Airport, and among the things that are there, there's this wonderful airport-long stained glass installation that I love. And then here in Minneapolis, getting off the plane, I'm greeted with a great quilt exhibit and mosaics lining the wall in several places. And so the idea of marking place and providing something important to engage is alive and well on even my own journey, and I see it everywhere I go in the country. Public art can contribute in a lot of other ways. So, for example, in our artists committee at Americans for the Arts, there are a number of great artists who have also been public artists. One who has recently passed away was Ellsworth Kelly. But Ellsworth Kelly was also a part of the Ghost Army, which was a World War II 1,100-person division, all of artists, many of them public artists, who used their work as a way to create disinformation or distraction so that the war could be won in other ways. I learned that from him, and because he was one of them, and all of the military work that we've done, which has been substantial, came out of that one encounter, that one inspiration by that one artist, and again, power possibly of artists and of public art. On a personal note, here in Minneapolis, I've just joined the board of the American Craft Council. I started off my arts work as a woodcarver. Hard way to make a buck in America, I can tell you that, but gave me great respect for makers. And so many craft artists are now public artists as well, working in glass and in metal and more. So I thank you for all of that, and I was struck in the comments on the Native American cultures here, because most of my life and now in Massachusetts was in a town that is the Wampanoag town, the town that became the last place where the Wampanoag Native Americans have as a home, and it's the tribal headquarters now. And some of the great Native American public art that is being done in the town, even some very small projects that are stealth projects. They're not even officially sanctioned, but little pieces of sculpture appear on the telephone poles all across the town as a stealth public art statement of the Wampanoag tribe. So I just wanted to give that a shout out. Couple quick things in my comments here. There's several things that Americans for the Arts is focusing on in a big way for the next couple of years. One is social impact, how the arts can make a difference on a lot of social impact fronts. I think many of you have seen our social impact indicator, the interactive wheel that we have online that has 26 different social impact areas, community areas, and you can interact and find policy, and you can find talking points, but you can also find art examples and public art examples. And my hope is that as we move forward, it will be populated in every one of those areas with many great public art examples of people who are dealing with public art and health, public art and the environment, public art and education, public art and all the issues of the day, which is exemplified in the work that you already do and that I see all the time. Second area, the area of equity, diversity, equity, and inclusion, overarching for the organization. and what we're focusing on is both internal and internal for all of our members, and what's the equity prism that people will take on related to boards and staffs and vendors and artists and the audiences and the policy. But also, we're putting a lot of effort into studying equitable investment. So many of our members have the gift of resources to then give out. How are they doing that equitably? So that's a social impact, the first thing. Second thing is the idea of equity itself, and as I just mentioned. Third thing is the political work, and I could talk for hours, but Patricia says I can't, on the political state. But we focus on two things very strongly for the next 2 years. The first one is legislative. And as you know, with your help, how many people here are members of the Action Fund? Okay, so it's free, gang, and so if everybody would join the Action Fund, you will hear everything in depth about what we're doing and be able to take action. We have 400,000 of your colleagues across America as members, and I'd love to have all of you be part of that, because that entity, those 400,000 people, stepped up last year and this year, and we were able to overturn the President of the United States and the Office of Management and Budget's zeroing out of all of the federal funding for the arts. And to really piss them off, we got an increase both years. So one of the things that is happening right now is that the NEA, the NEH were zeroed out again. And tomorrow, you will meet the new chair of the Appropriations Subcommittee that oversees the NEA and the NEH, Congresswoman McCollum. And I hope there will be a lot of hoops and claps, because she's a fabulous leader. And we were able to work with her and that subcommittee and the Congressional Arts Caucus to get them to put forward a $12.5 million increase for next year in the House of Representatives, and it looks good in the Senate as well. So legislative will be a big whoop tomorrow for her. So a little one today, that's good. Thank you. The second thing is electoral work. So we will visit with every candidate, if they will visit with us, for president, over 20 different candidates for president of the United States, Democrat and Republican. All of them filled out the forms last time. Donald Trump was the first one who sent in his form. What it said was that he considered himself a great artist, and that if he wasn't the greatest, real estate person in history, he would be the greatest filmmaker in history. And so, but his policy, that's one of the things, that what people say and then what they do sometimes can be very different. So we had a chance to meet with Mayor Pete Buttigieg last week. He came to the office. We've met with Governor Hickenlooper. I had a chance to talk to Joe Biden beginning of the week. We have Congressman John Delaney, so 4 so far. And artist Ben Folds, musician Ben Folds, is helping us with those conversations as part of our artist committee. We will be in Iowa at the State Fair this year and at the caucuses. We'll be in New Hampshire. We'll be at the Republican National Committee, the Democratic National Committee, to try to put the issue of the arts, public art, in front of the candidates so that they will then be supportive, we hope. So those 3 things. And then the fourth one is partnership. And I want to say a little bit more about that, because you are exemplars of partnership in the arts. I know that, like most arts and cultural work, public art and artists engage in projects that don't happen without collaboration. And success actually relies on a healthy partnership. The kinds of things that we see around the country are things working with built environments, for example, like public art in master planning, or the incorporation of public art in transportation projects, or artists embedded in residencies and actual departments around the country. I know that Charlotte Arts in Transit program has worked with others on transportation projects. I know that a program that I read about, haven't seen, but My Your Our Water, Scottsdale Public Art, Salt River Project, Breckenridge Creative Arts, all performing together to look at water issues out there, and taking that project there to other sites in Arizona and Michigan and Colorado. And so that kind of collaboration is critical. I see it, with municipal governments partnering with artists and expanding infrastructure and physical artworks. I had a chance to talk with, before it ever happened, with Mayor Marty Walsh in Boston about his idea to embed artists in all of the city departments there, fire department, police department, and so on. Even here in the Twin Cities, creative city making program and city artists in St. Paul are places working with stellar artists collaborating in municipal areas. I think that we see other kinds of partnerships that we're involved with, like, for example, the American Planning Association and a collaboration with the Massachusetts Area Planning Council and the NEA with an Our Town grant, to look at issues that are related to planning and how public art fits into that. And those are national associations, and other ones that we work with on your behalf because they have money that helps you is the United States Conference of Mayors, or the League of Cities, or the National Association of Counties. So there are many such wonderful examples, and I applaud you on all of those. And I want to mostly just say thank you to you. I also want to do a shout out to Roberto Bedoya, who's going to be getting an award in a few moments. I've known him for over 30 years. I know too much. That's why they wouldn't let me actually give the award out to him. Lots of secrets. We actually were locked in a room on Capitol Hill together for 36 hours until we solved how to save the NEA some 30 years ago, and we did it. The thing here is that I thank you, and I hope that public art will be something that is, throughout the rest of the conference, a message that the others who are here can learn from you. I'm here to learn from you. I congratulate you. I appreciate what you do. Have a great conference. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Pam Corza, she, her, and with Barbara Schaefer-Bacon, I co-direct the Animating Democracy program at Americans for the Arts. We're the folks who have coordinated the Artist Municipal Partnership track or thread that many of you are participating in today, and we're so thrilled to have the opportunity to do that. The way that we have organized the thread is really to highlight the kinds of partnerships that are happening across the country more and more, where artists are working in public planning agencies, with public works departments, with police precincts. You name the department, they are there. And they are together, not one more than the other, but together, implementing fresh approaches to the way government works. They're exercising creative thinking and strategies that can expand who participates in public life, who helps to inform and make decisions. And they're even venturing into the challenging sphere of contributing to systems change. These aspirations are no small matter, and they require a sort of ramping up of partnership, and that is what we plan to explore this morning and this afternoon. So why here and now? We are first in the midst of people who do this work. You have set historic precedent over time, and many of you are sort of stretching the percent for art model. Many of you are local arts agencies who are working to help embed artists in municipal government. And second, as Bob said, we have the chance being here to highlight two of the leading edge artist municipal partnership programs in the country. The Creative City Making program here in Minneapolis, coordinated by the Office of Arts, Culture, and Creative Economy, and the City Artist program in St. Paul, coordinated by the Public Art St. Paul organization, and both of them will be featured in one of the tours this afternoon. I'll take the occasion to thank Gulgun Kam and Colleen Sheehy from those two organizations who've been instrumental not only as co-hosts of this pre-conference, but helping us to conceive of and implement the thread. The third reason for why here and now is a little bit of shameless promotion. With our partner, A Blade of Grass, in the fall, we'll be publishing an Artist Municipal Partnership Guide resulting from research and interviews with many of you in this room as well as others, which we hope will be a practical guide for both sides of the partnership. And I'll also recognize Jen Hughes, I don't know if she's in the room, and the NEA Our Town program, which actually provided support. Thank you, Jen, for this guide. So now it is my pleasure to kick off this topic and our first presenter, who is sort of partnership incarnate. He is artist Jeremiah Ellison, and he is city council member Jeremiah Ellison. As an 8-year-old, he painted his first mural in his North Minneapolis neighborhood. Fast forward to 2016, and as a creative city-making artist, he developed a large-scale board game that got residents talking and thinking about political power and decision-making. His social and creative activism in his home neighborhood has taken many forms, but always lifts up, as he says, the genius of the community. Currently, as city council member, he fights for workers' rights, economic and racial equity, neighborhood safety and peace, and self-determination, and of course, the role of the arts in all of those things. I'm honored to welcome artist and Ward 5 council member, Jeremiah Ellison.
Good morning. How's everybody doing? Oh, good. Real quick, I just wanted to recognize a few folks. First, my first interaction with the arts at the City of Minneapolis was actually with Mary Altman, who's Director of Public Art, so thank you, Mary, it's good to see you. I also want to thank Gulgun Kaim, who does run Creative City Making, and then also just a personal shout out to one of my mentors. I think I saw Setu Jones walk into the place. Setu, are you around? Are you still in the room? Okay, there you go. Good to see you. Again, my name is Jeremiah Ellison. I'm a visual artist, a muralist, and an illustrator, and I'm the Ward 5 City Council member here in Minneapolis. And I wanted to talk a little bit about creative city making that President Lynch brought up. But first, I wanted to say, one of the things that you realize before you run for office is that you never quite identify where you live by the ward that you live in, right, or precinct. And then while you're running for office, you also realize that nobody around you does either. Nobody identifies where they live by their ward. And so in Ward 5 and in Ward 4, which is just north of me, people just say they live on the north side. So when I say the north side, that's what I'm referring to. I'm referring to the ward that I represent. So I was born and raised on the north side. And before I go into creative city making, my creative city making project, I want to tell you guys a little bit about things that I think are important about North Minneapolis. So the north side is the home of a man named Van White, who was the first black person ever elected to the Minneapolis City Council, and he represented basically almost the identical area that I represent right now. The north side is where Prince first met Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis and created what became known as the Minneapolis Sound. And the North Side is where, in 1967, marginalized black teenagers and young people became fed up with the city's racism. They lived in a part of town that had become majority black, but nearly all of the businesses were white, and none of them were eager to hire young black people to work there. When a white shop owner shot a black teenager, folks took to the streets and they burned down the shops, the white-owned shops along Plymouth Avenue. And the city referred to it as riots, as race riots, but the people who participated in those riots referred to it as a rebellion. And so I say all that to help you understand the context that I grew up in, the context of the place that made me an artist. And as you can imagine, it informed the kinds of stories that I wanted to tell. And it informed the way that I interpreted power. And it often informed the way that I interpreted the role of City Hall, where I now work, and institutions like it. I don't think I knew it at the time, but when I first joined the creative city making team, I think I did it with every intention of metaphorically burning down City Hall. And so I didn't know how I was going to do it or if I was going to be successful, but I felt like as a North Sider, it was kind of my obligation to try. And as a 25-year-old whose only real skills were painting and drawing, and that's basically still true, I figured my best option was to paint a mural in City Hall, something that was so earth-shattering that it was going to rock the institution to its core. I chose the electoral engagement project because it seemed that the first step in getting buy-in and toppling any sort of large institution seemed to get your message as far and as wide as possible, and elections can be a pretty good way to do that. And so I began my work and instantly started learning City Hall, and my project went through a lot of iterations. It changed over the course of the year. And so I began with this idea of wanting to paint a mural, and I didn't know anything about the building association or like historic preservation, so I instantly sort of started hitting these roadblocks, right? And I could say that when you put a 25-year-old artist into a bureaucracy, you can get entangled as the artist, right? You don't know how to navigate the bureaucracy, and it gets a little confusing. And so I was constantly met with folks who are eager to get to know, right, as opposed to get to a yes, right? So the mural, I spent a couple of months trying to figure out how to get the mural off the ground. It wasn't going to work, and so I was like, okay, they're not going to let me paint on the walls. Let me figure out what else I can do. I started working trying to create a comic book to help folks understand, how to navigate City Hall and how to get involved beyond just voting for their electeds. But narratively, it became kind of too muddled, and I couldn't, again, it was kind of that get to know attitude that I kept bumping up against. And so I eventually scrapped the comic book idea. And then I started developing this idea, this board game. And it was successful, I think. But I didn't have the whole year to develop it and craft it, and so and I think it could have been a lot more successful as an engagement tool had I had that. And so as the year went on, I found myself constantly unsure of how to move forward. I began to spend most of my time walking around the building, attending city council meetings, learning the committee structure, and every time I learned something new, my project again was changing. I do want to tell a story about a successful creative city making project, and while I'm proud of the work that I did do on my project, that's not. I don't know that it was the success that I'd hoped for. I think that my fatal error was that I had become obsessed with creating an object, whether it be a mural or a book or a board game. I really was fixated on the thing that I was going to make. Because I'm kind of a thing maker. That's what I do. I didn't know how to communicate with the institution, and the institution did not know how to communicate with me as an artist navigating through it. And so I left feeling like the only way that I could exist in City Hall was as a decision maker. And so I set out to do that. There was a project, not my project, in regulatory services that I believe should be turned into a 101 course in how to shift culture in a large institution. I'm sad that the brilliant Monkwe Ndosi, who led that project, isn't here to talk about the project, but I'll kind of give my summary. Monkwe and her partner Reggie's project was successful on, I think, a really basic level. While I obsessed over making an object, Monque and her team focused on people, the people in the department she was working with and the people most affected by that department's work. She sought to address a basic question: how can the city's regulatory arm become an asset to renters, especially low-income renters, who often associate regulatory services as a threat to their housing? Regulatory services often will sometimes have to condemn a building, they'll have to revoke a license, which often those landlords might deserve, but in turn, that displaces the very people who are supposed to benefit from those protections. Monque and her team use theater, and I am not an actor, not a performer, so I can't explain the methodology fully as well as she could, but the short version is it worked, and I want to explain a little bit why. When I was 25, I started my creative city-making project, and when I was 28 is when I started my first day in office. And so after my election, I was eager to start getting to my platform and to start addressing it and to start attacking some of the issues that I'd put there, one of which was renters' rights. I inherited a 5-year struggle with the slumlord in my ward, and as I began to unpack the 5-year ordeal, I began to see problems in how the city was dealing with the tenants, the role that we were playing in the potential displacement of those tenants. And as I worked with colleagues to address the issues, and as I began communicating with staff about changes that I wanted to see and how we dealt with tenants, I discovered that many of the on-the-ground staff, many of the inspectors who do the work, had already slowly begun to make these changes in their own behavior well before I got there. And so as I began asking more questions, I realized that many of these inspectors who I was talking to, who had already sort of been bought into this philosophy that I was developing as an elected, they had worked directly with Monque and Reggie on their project during creative city making in a project that was called Hearing Tenant Voices. And so the work had already kind of begun to move even before I got there. And I realized that while I was busy sort of thinking that I could only steer the institution from the top down, that people like Monque and these inspectors were already sort of steering the institution from the grassroots level, and that their work was ultimately going to last longer because of it. And so that's not to say that the role of a city council member isn't important, but I want to emphasize that theater workshops turned into culture shift, culture change, and that turned into eventually a departmental policy. So after I realized the work that they were doing, I started working on an internal policy, a staff policy called the Renter First policy that emphasized some of the tools that we can use to fix up a place, change ownership of, help encourage a change in ownership of a place so that the tenant is not displaced in the process of us trying to hold a landlord accountable. But that work came, again, from the grassroots. So a policy change, a departmental policy change is maybe, it's an outcome that only people in process can produce, but it's an artistic outcome that maybe is less legible and less tangible, I think, than the average kind of object that people are used to seeing artists make. You know, so a mural or a comic book or a sculpture, these are important things, but I'd argue that, that the kind of change that Monque's theater workshops did in the Department of Regulatory Services goes a lot further, in my humble opinion, in changing people's lives. And it was interesting for me to see the role of art in doing that. So if you're asking yourself whether the creative city making model is something that you should do in your city, I would kind of offer you that there's two potential pathways, probably more than two, but there's two that I can kind of see from my vantage point. The first pathway is mine. A young artist comes in, gets entangled in a bureaucracy, everyone tells them no, and they get frustrated and they leave, convinced that the institution does not want to change. And the others is Monque's, which I'd say on one hand you have Monque's brilliance, but on the other hand you have a veteran artist who sort of kicks down and understands how to kick down every single barrier that's put in front of her in order to build relationships and create that kind of departmental change. And so if you're looking for a mural, if you're looking for a sculpture, if you're looking for a poem or a play, which I think are all amazing things, I play my role in creating those kinds of things, but if that's what you're looking for, an artistic product, then I don't know that creative city making is really the right process for your city. But if you're willing to let the artistic process be the deliverable, I think that that's going to serve you a lot more, and I think that it can go a lot further than the creation of an object. So thank you all, and that's all I have for you today.
So, up next, we have the Public Art Network Leadership Award. This is an award given annually in recognition and honor of innovative and creative contributions and/or exemplary commitment and leadership to the field of public art. It can be given to either an individual, including an artist, administrator, volunteer, designer, or government official, or an organization, including an arts council, public art program, or private or public entity. The award is presented by the Americans for the Arts Public Art Network and selected by the Public Art Network Advisory Council. This year, it is an honor to award it to Roberto Bedoya. Roberto is the Cultural Affairs Manager for the City of Oakland, California. His career-long commitment to expanding the definition of inclusion and belonging, as well as to art-based civic engagement projects, have made him a leader in the national conversation about arts in public life. In his current work, Roberto shepherded the city's cultural plan, Belonging in Oakland, a cultural development plan. Roberto's essays, U.S. cultural policy, its politics and participation, its creative potential, and creative placemaking in the politics of belonging and disbelonging, reframe discussion on cultural policy to shed light on exclusionary practices and cultural policy decision-making. In his previous position as executive director of the Tucson-Pima Arts Council, Roberto established the innovative Place, People, Land, Arts, Culture, and Engagement Initiative to support artists' initiatives, and during his tenure as executive director of the National Association of Artists Organizations from 1996 to 2001, he developed numerous initiatives in support of artist-led alternative spaces. He is a poet whose work has appeared in numerous publications, and an art consultant with projects for Creative Capital Foundation, the Ford Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, and the Urban Institute. Roberto is a Creative Placemaking Fellow as well at Arizona State University. Please join me in welcoming Roberto Bedoya, our 2019 PAN Leadership Awardee, to the stage for his presentation. Thank you.
Good morning. My sinuses are a mess, so I don't know how well I'm communicating. I'm having a hard time hearing. But thank you so much. I have a few remarks. So when they contacted me about this award, I was surprised, and I am deeply honored. But I had to reflect, why me? You know, I'm an arts manager, an arts advocate, but more than that, I'm an interloper. I don't feel like I ever feel really right in one place. I'm not a public art manager. I'm not an artist who makes public art pieces. If you get me going about all the rigmarole associated with producing a public artwork, you know, procurement, contracts and compliance, community folks, extended deadlines, elected officials, engineers, bird, dogs, your mama, the butterflies, all those players. Well, in that mix, you may encounter my inner chihuahua who will bark. Why? What? How come? How much? So those are those things that I sort of rumble through as my relationship to public art. Nevertheless, I'm blessed as the director of a local arts agency to oversee public art programs, first for the city of Tucson, and Jeff's in the back there, he's a great dude, and now in Oakland, where I really have to give a shout out to my good colleague, Christian Zerma, who runs our public art program. He's been at it for quite a number of years. So the other day, I was walking from City Hall to a nearby park for a dedication of a new public artwork and the redesign of a park near Lake Merritt. And in my walk, I was reflecting on what I would say, this award, my career in the field of creative placemaking, creative placekeeping, my writings, my fondness for entanglements, the entanglement of public will, political will, and poetic will associated with public art. And for me, it's not so much public art, but public life in art. Public life in art that this room supports. And the public, to me, the promiscuous public, who's so damn slippery, it always keeps you alert. I love that. The public life in art is what we're all of us are engaged in, facilitate. The public life in art shapes locale, places. Of late, I've been thinking of creative placemaking and all its troubles. I love you guys. They're my colleagues in trouble with me. Asking is creative placemaking a property rights movement or human rights movement? Creative placemaking that destroys the social networks of a locale is central to its actions as a property rights enterprise that foregrounds financial wealth accumulations at its essence. How is creative placemaking complicit in this development of the city's housing crisis for working class folks, for artists, the increased number of individuals living on the streets, the complicity of artists and arts organizations, the field of public art and creative placemaking as a property rights movement is at times deliberate and at other times blind to the privatization of our public sphere, its alignment with free market ideologies at play in cultural and public policies. A public life in art pays witness to and prompts how imagination circulates among the inhabitants of a locale. It feeds and contributes to the aesthetic speech of a place, the aesthetic ordering of we, as the secular we, the people, as opposed to the we of me and my friends. A public life in art is about relation, not relationships, not the transactional exchange of dollars and those networks of exchange, but the transformative power of knowing your neighbor, the neighborhood, of remembering, of being in relation. The public life in art awakens the civic narrative of how do we belong in relation. The tie, the current between public art and public life in art is the relationship embedded in beauty as an articulation of the plural, in the manifestations of a just city that is emancipatory, that cares and orbits in our fevered dreams. So thank you for this award. Thank you for your dreams and the mighty wind in a public life in art. Thank you.